Good morning, sixth graders, on this blustery day. Today we're going to do a little exploration of the Dakota winter counts. Now, this is a form of their Dakota's artwork, a way of expressing themselves, of course, because they did not have a written language. So, these winter counts were a form of art as well as communication and history. So, it's really quite simple. Um, the Dakota did not think of time in a linear fashion, like a straight line. They thought of time and events more in a circular fashion. So this is how their winter counts went. An elder of the tribe who was skilled in artwork would be responsible for keeping track of a rather large sheet of what I would call like bison or deer hide. Right, and then it was his responsibility or her responsibility every year to add one symbol to this hide, and the symbol was supposed to represent a major event that happened to the tribe that year. Some of the events were positive, some of the events were negative. They could have been a birth, it could have been a fire or a meeting, or it could have been a hunt. It could have been a lot of things. So, whatever happened to that particular tribe of 50 to 100 Dakota, they would pick out a symbol and then that elder would write it on there, or draw it on there, excuse me. And then he or she would hold on to this parfleche or this skin for the whole year. It was their responsibility to hold on to it, and then the next year they would add something again to it. Um, Historians and archaeologists don't know for sure which time of the year they added some of these symbols, if it was at the beginning of the winter or the end of the winter, but it was centered around that time. The winter was kind of like the cutoff point for a year. And when someone asks you how old you were, you would say, I'm 5 winters old, which means you've lived through 5 winters or you've seen 5 winters. Now, these are outstanding pieces of evidence because it gives us an example of, or gives us an idea anyway, of how long or what was happening to the Dakota people. Now, some of these symbols on here are quite interesting. I don't think this one has it, but I have seen one where there's a person. Oh, here it is right here. It's a body shape with red dots on it, and that usually meant smallpox. The introduction of smallpox to a tribe usually meant mortality rates or death rates of around 50%. So that was obviously a big part of that year. Sometimes horses were introduced, um, but these are the major events, the major yearly events in the lives of the Dakota. So your job today is to create one of these. Um, Now, there's a video on this page that I will play right now, and then you can watch to give you some ideas on this.
Winter counts are a form of historical record, a document that were created by the Lakota. Every winter was given a distinctive name, which was a way of referring to a time when something happened. The Lakota are one large division of a group of people that most people know of as the Sioux, or the Sioux Nation. They certainly had a very strongly developed and formalized sense of history. These winter counts encapsulated that and are very strongly connected to people's sense of identity, both in the past and in the present.
So if we begin here...
Other events that people knew had happened that were carried in the oral tradition could be placed in time by reference to those years. So I see winter counts as primarily an oral tradition.
What this winter count depicts is a battle with the crow, and we know that by the hairstyle. Another new glyph, and he was probably... Winter counts were usually a communal history. The winter count keeper documented the events for the Teospai. Teospai is a large family unit. And it was from that family unit that they came together to decide what event to document for that year. I think by looking at the winter counts, you can see what was happening within that community. The depiction of that particular year could probably spark all these other memories of things that happened throughout that time.
Each new keeper followed very closely the sequencing of years, the names of the years that had been chosen, so that the winter count keeper could always be sure over time to keep these dozens and even in some instances hundreds of years in a proper sequence by referring to the pictorial record. There are a number of levels at which we can read winter counts. You can interpret a certain amount just from looking at the pictures. One can recognize a picture of a horse. Different kinds of hairstyles and clothing were used as a shorthand to represent different tribes. Many of the figures are quite simple. Many of the years are represented by individual people. Without a text, you really can't go any further than that. Fortunately, a number of texts were recorded directly from the winter count keepers. When one has a winter count, such as the Rosebud winter count, that came to us with no explanatory text, it's still possible to figure out what's going on and recognize the years. The thing that one looks for is a particular event that's recorded in all of the Lakota winter counts that we know of, and that's known as the year the stars fell. That was an event that is also known in the Western calendar as the Leonid meteor shower, which occurred in November of 1833. It's very difficult to know in a given year when you're recording something that is memorable, whether 20 years from now it will still be considered important or not. For that reason, among others, the counts themselves can't be taken as a synthesizing history. They are a framework in which a much broader history can be attached. They are primary documents. They are raw materials, just as many other kinds of physical written documents are preserved in Western culture. There are a number of widespread misconceptions about winter counts that tie into misconceptions about Native American cultures in general, I think. One is that they were always a primitive and unchanging people. In fact, Indian cultures have changed a lot over time and continue to change. And the winter counts, both the pictures and the texts that were recorded with them, give us a Lakota perspective on events at the time. It's quite a different idea of history, where the physical written record is not the most important.
Sitting Bull's cabin, where he was killed by Indian police.
But it's also a wonderful window into Lakota culture and ways of thinking, different way of viewing the world.
So we see the horseshoe tracks.
Okay, so you got a more scientific perspective of what the winter count looks like. So your job is really quite easy today. What you're going to do is you're going to create your own winter count. And your teacher's going to hand a piece of paper to you. And the winter count has on it a chart on the first page. And let me pull this chart up here, please, as I'm not prepared. But this chart is like a pre-writing activity. And so what you're going to do eventually is you're going to sketch down an idea for each year of your life. Okay, so you have year one, so that would be your 1-year-old year, year 2, year 3, so on and so forth. And if you could just write down your most memorable event from that time. Now, obviously, it's hard for you guys to remember when you were 1, 2, 3 years old. So do your best. Don't get stuck on this. Don't get hung up on it. If you have to make it up, make it up. It's not the end of the world. But once you get that memorable event written down, then you need to come over here to the pictograph idea column and loosely sketch an idea of what's going to match up with this memorable event. Okay, so you're going to do that for all 11 or maybe 12 years of your life. On the back side, you're going to take these pictograph ideas and you're going to place them into a spiral. Now, this is kind of tricky. Now your sheet will have a really lightly drawn spiral in it. And it'll go in a, I suppose, counterclockwise fashion. So your first event is going to start at the very middle. And then you're going to work out in concentric circles as you add more of these images. So you need to have like a spatial recognition of your allotment here of size of paper space. You need to fit 11 events in sort of a corkscrew fashion on here. Okay. And if you want to add basic colors, you go right ahead and do that. And then when you're done with that, you can go ahead and turn that into your teacher. If there's still time left over, I put a link on today's Google location, October 6th, for this website that I found. Kind of neat. It's called Beginning Dakota. There's been a push in recent years to preserve and teach the Dakota language, which was dying. And what they have here are these lessons for kids your age. And you go ahead and click on these, like lesson 1 here. And these are the names of the 7 council fires or the 7 tribes or bands, excuse me. And if you click on this blue arrow, it will tell you the correct Dakota pronunciation. Now that would have been handy yesterday when we were reading the story about Starboy and the North Wind, those difficult words that your teachers try to pronounce. But go ahead and click through these. Lesson 1 has the names. Lesson 3 has just some common pronouns, I would guess you'd call them, in the Dakota language. And you can go ahead and click through these. Since it's an audio file, please have your earbuds in. You don't have to do this, but if you have time, you could just kind of thumb through here and see what you can find. One quick reminder, on the week of MEA, probably that Tuesday, we're going to have that states test. Now, it won't be capitals. It'll just be the location of the states. And I'll give it to you on a sheet of paper, and then you'll put the correct states on there. So also, if you've got time, you should keep practicing those. It won't be an unlimited time amount, but it'll be a 15-minute time block to do that. Okay. If there's any questions, please make sure you ask your teacher. Make sure you hand this in today before you leave, and have a great Tuesday.